The gunshot cracked through the saloon like thunder, silencing every drunk and cutthroat in Black Hollow. On the auction block stood a girl in a torn dress, her brother's trembling hand still raised to accept the mine baron's final bid. But the mountain ghost called Silas Crow had other plans. Gold hit the floor. Blood would follow. What happened next in that frozen Colorado hellhole would become legend, a story of monsters, mercy, and the brutal price of redemption. Stay with me until the end of this tale, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The wind off the Rockies carried the smell of death and cheap whiskey, which in Black Hollow meant it was just another Thursday. Silas Crow stood at the edge of the mining camp, watching the town crawl with human filth the way a wolf watches sheep. No hunger, just cold assessment. Snow clung to his buffalo coat in thick clumps. His beard, more ice than hair at this point, cracked when he moved his jaw. The scars running down the left side of his face looked like something had tried to claw its way out from the inside. 6 months since he'd come down from the high country. Maybe 7. Time moved different up there. He didn't want to be here. Needed supplies, though. Coffee, ammunition, lamp oil. The kind of things you couldn't trap or shoot. His cabin sat 3 days' hard climb into country so rough even the Utes avoided it. That's how he liked it. No people. No questions. No memories that could find him in the dark. Black Hollow squatted in a valley like a tumor, growing fat on silver and human misery. Canvas tents and crooked buildings leaked smoke into the gray afternoon. The mine works chewed into the mountain face, spitting out ore and broken men in equal measure. Most didn't last a season. The ones who did weren't men anymore. Silas had seen it before. Different town, same rot. He led his horse, a mean-tempered gray gelding, with eyes like his own, down the frozen main street. Miners and gamblers scattered from his path without knowing why. Something in how he moved, maybe. The way predators recognize each other. "That's Crow," someone whispered from a doorway. "Bullshit. That bastard's dead." "Look at him." "That's him." Silas ignored them. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Fear kept people at a distance, and distance was what kept him breathing. The general store sat wedged between a brothel and a coffin-maker's shop, Black Hollow's version of civic planning. Silas tied the gelding and pushed through the door. The proprietor, a nervous man with spectacles and thinning hair, went white as fresh snow. "Mr. Crow," his voice cracked. We're honored. Coffee, 100 rounds of .4 4-40, 2 gallons lamp oil." Silas dropped a leather pouch on the counter. Gold dust whispered inside. "Keep the change." The man's hands shook, gathering the supplies. Silas watched the street through dirty windows. A freight wagon struggled through the mud. 2 prostitutes argued on a corner. Normal frontier ugliness. Then he saw them dragging the girl. She fought like a cat in a sack, all desperate fury and no chance. 3 men hauled her across the street toward the Lucky Strike saloon. Her dress, probably nice once, hung in tatters. Dark hair whipped around a face that would have been pretty without the purple bruise blooming across her cheekbone. "Please," she screamed. "Thomas, don't do this!" A 4th man followed, younger, well-dressed for Black Hollow, meaning his coat had most of its buttons and his boots matched. Drunk, though, stumbling drunk. He wouldn't meet the girl's eyes. "Ain't got a choice, Elena," he slurred. "Debt's a debt." They hauled her through the saloon doors. Her screams cut off when they slammed shut. "What's that about?" Silas heard himself ask. The shopkeeper flinched. "Vale kid. Thomas Vale, gambler. Lost big to Victor Mercer last night. We're talking $5,000 big. Money he don't have." He swallowed. "Mercer's taking the sister in trade." "Taking her?" "Well, auctioning her. Same thing, really. Half the town's probably in there bidding right now." The man tried a sick smile. "Frontier justice, you could say." Silas looked at his supplies on the counter. Coffee, bullets, oil. Everything he needed to disappear back into the mountains and forget the world existed. "Your items are ready, Mr. Crow." He should leave. Should walk out that door, climb back into country where human evil couldn't reach, and let Black Hollow eat itself like it was always going to anyway. Should. "Hold those," Silas said, and walked out. The Lucky Strike saloon hadn't seen soap or dignity in its entire existence. Silas pushed through the doors into a wall of noise, men shouting, laughing, pounding tables. Smoke hung thick enough to chew. Every piece of human trash in Black Hollow had crawled out of their holes for this particular entertainment. The girl stood on the bar itself, wrists bound, that young fool Thomas swaying beside her with an auctioneer's grin that didn't reach his terrified eyes. Gentlemen, gentlemen, Thomas raised his hands. Let's keep this civilized. My sister Elena, 22 years old, good cook, reads and writes, healthy as they come. Let me down, you bastard! Elena tried to kick him, but someone grabbed her ankle. Laughter rolled through the crowd. Current bid stands at $200 from Mr. Harwell in the back. $250, someone shouted. $300. Victor Mercer sat at a corner table like a spider in expensive silk. 50 years old, soft around the middle, with the kind of face that smiled while doing evil. 4 armed men flanked him. The mine owner who ruled Black Hollow through money and casual brutality watched the auction like a man watching steers at market. $500, Mercer said quietly. His voice cut through the noise like a knife. And I'll thank the rest of you to stop wasting my time. Silence dropped like a curtain. Nobody bid against Victor Mercer. Not if they wanted to keep breathing. Thomas licked his lips. Mr. Mercer bids $500 going once. You can't do this, Elena's voice broke. Thomas, I'm your sister. Going twice. Please. Sold to Mr. Mercer for... The gunshot made every man in the saloon reach for iron. Silas stood just inside the doors, revolver smoking in his hand, the bullet hole in the ceiling still raining plaster. He hadn't drawn fast. Hadn't needed to. These weren't gunfighters, just vultures who got brave in packs. Auction's over, he said. Thomas nearly fell off the bar. Who the hell? That's Silas Crow, someone whispered. The name rippled through the crowd like plague. Men backed away from the bar. Hands moved carefully away from weapons. Even drunk, even stupid, they knew what Silas Crow meant. Death, quick or slow, depending on his mood. Mercer stayed seated, but his men stood, hands on their guns. The mine baron's smile never wavered. Mr. Crow, the mountain finally spit you out? Girl's not for sale. Well now, see, that's where you're wrong. Mercer gestured at Thomas. Young Mr. Vale here owes me considerable money. We've reached an arrangement. No arrangement. Silas crossed to the bar, boots heavy on the warped floorboards. Men scrambled out of his path. Debt's cleared. And how exactly? Silas threw a leather pouch onto Mercer's table. It hit with the heavy thunk of raw gold. A lot of raw gold. That's $800 in dust, Silas said. More than covers his debt. More than she's worth. More than you deserve. He looked at Mercer's hired guns. Anybody disagrees, speak now. Nobody spoke. Mercer opened the pouch, examined the gold, closed it again. His smile widened, but his eyes went dead. Well, business is business, I suppose. He pocketed the pouch. The girl's yours, Mr. Crow. Congratulations on your purchase. Silas turned to Elena. Up close, the bruise looked worse. Someone had hit her hard. Recently. Her eyes, dark brown, furious, terrified, met his without flinching. You hurt? He asked. What do you care? Fair question. He pulled his knife, men tensed, and cut the ropes binding her wrists. She rubbed circulation back into her hands, watching him like he might strike. Can you walk? I can run if that's what it takes to get out of this place. Walking's fine, come on. He headed for the door. Elena jumped down from the bar and followed. Because staying meant Mercer and staying with Mercer meant things worse than death. Wait! Thomas stumbled after them. Elena, listen, I didn't want... She turned so fast he flinched. You sold me, your own sister, for gambling debts. I'll pay you back, I swear. Her fist caught him square in the nose. Thomas went down like a dropped sack, blood streaming through his fingers. Elena stood over him, shaking with rage. Stay away from me. If I see you again, I'll kill you myself. Silas almost smiled. Almost. We're leaving, he said. Outside, the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. The sky promised snow, heavy snow, the kind that killed unprepared travelers. Silas untied his gelding and swung into the saddle. Elena stood in the frozen mud, looking up at him. "What now?" she asked. "Now you come with me." "To where?" "Cabin. 3 days north." "3 days." She laughed, but it came out broken. "Into the mountains. With you." "You got a better option?" She looked back at the saloon. Through the dirty windows, men had already gone back to drinking, whoring, forgetting she'd ever existed. Thomas was probably still on the floor. "Guess not," she said quietly. Silas offered his hand. She stared at it, scarred, huge, capable of terrible violence, then grabbed it and let him pull her up behind the saddle. "Hold on," he said. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling muscle and scars through the buffalo coat. The horse started moving. Black Hollow fell away behind them, swallowed by gathering snow. "What's your name?" Elena asked after a mile. "You know my name." "I know what they call you. I'm asking what you're called." "Silas." "Elena, but you knew that already." He didn't answer. The wind picked up, throwing ice against their faces. Elena pressed closer to his back, stealing warmth. She smelled like fear and smoke and something floral underneath. Soap, maybe, from when life was different. "Why'd you do it?" she asked. "By me, I mean." Silas watched the trail ahead, the dark line of pines marching up into white nothing. "Seemed wrong," he said finally, "what they were doing." "So you're the noble type?" "No." "Then what type are you?" He didn't answer that either. Couldn't, really. What was he? Ghost? Killer? Dead man still walking because he was too mean to lie down? They rode in silence as afternoon bled into evening. The snow came gentle at first, then harder, then like the sky was trying to bury the world. Visibility dropped to nothing. The temperature fell until breathing hurt. Elena's grip weakened around his waist. "Stay awake," Silas said. "I'm trying." Her words slurred. "So cold." "I know, stay awake anyway." But cold didn't care about trying. It took and took until there was nothing left to take. Elena's arms slipped. Silas caught her before she fell, pulled the horse to a stop. She barely responded when he shook her. "Elena, look at me." Her eyes fluttered open. "Can't. Need to sleep." "You sleep, you die." "Maybe that's okay." "It's not." He dismounted, pulled her down after him. She collapsed against his chest like a broken doll. Silas looked around. Nothing but white hell in every direction. No shelter, no cave, no trees thick enough to block the wind, nothing but his coat and his body. He wrapped her in the buffalo hide, sat with his back against the horse's flank to block the wind, and held her against his chest. Shared heat, basic survival, nothing more. Elena burrowed into him, seeking warmth with animal desperation. Her whole body shook. "You're going to freeze," she mumbled against his shirt. "I've been colder." Liar. Maybe, probably. But he'd survived worse than weather. Survived things that should have killed him. Survived himself. He could survive one more night. The storm screamed around them. Snow piled up against his back. Silas felt the cold working into his bones, that deep ache that promised damage, but he didn't move, just held the shivering woman and stared into the white nothing. Somewhere in the endless dark, Elena stopped shaking, started breathing steady and deep. Sleep, not death. Her face pressed against his neck, breath warm on his skin. When was the last time someone had been this close? Years. Before the fire. Before everything burned. Mary used to curl against him like this on cold nights. Their son between them, small and warm and safe. A family. A life that felt real instead of this hollow existence. Dead now. All of them dead. And him still breathing. Silas closed his eyes and waited for dawn. Morning came gray and frozen. The storm had passed but left 4 feet of fresh snow. The horse stood patient as a statue, ice crusted on its mane. Elena woke slowly, confused, then jerked back when she realized where she was. "Easy," Silas said. "Storm's over." She looked around at the white wasteland. "We're alive." "Seems like." "You stayed awake all night?" "Someone had to." She studied his face, the scars, the frost in his beard, the eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "You could have left me," she said. "Taken your coat back." Saved yourself. Could've. Why didn't you? Silas stood, joints protesting, and offered his hand again. Because I bought you. That makes you my responsibility until I say otherwise. She didn't take his hand this time, stood on her own, though her legs shook. I'm not property, she said. No, you're not. Then what am I? He looked at her. This woman he'd bought from monsters with gold that could have kept him supplied for years. This stranger who'd almost died in his arms last night. This problem he'd chosen when he could have chosen nothing. Trouble, he said finally. Your trouble. Elena almost smiled. At least you're honest. They rode through country that got rougher with each mile. The valleys fell away. The mountains rose like teeth. Civilization became a memory, then a dream, then nothing at all. On the second day, they passed through a forest where the trees grew so thick the snow barely penetrated. The silence felt like pressure. Elena had stopped asking questions, just held on and tried not to slow them down. That night, Silas built a fire in a shallow cave and boiled coffee black as sin. Elena sat across from him, hands wrapped around a tin cup, staring into the flames. What happens when we get there? She asked quietly. Get where? Your cabin. Silas poked at the fire. You rest. Heal up. Figure out what's next. And if there is no next? If I have nowhere to go? Everyone's got somewhere. Not me. Her voice went flat. My parents are dead. My brother sold me. I have no money, no prospects, no husband. She stopped, looked away. Nothing. Silas watched her across the fire. She was lying. Not about most of it, but something she wasn't saying. People lied all the time, to others, to themselves. He'd become good at spotting it. But it wasn't his business. She'd tell him or she wouldn't. Either way, come spring, she'd leave and he'd go back to being alone. That's how it had to be. You'll figure it out, he said. Will I? She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw something in her eyes he recognized. Desperation, the kind that made people do stupid things, dangerous things. I have to tell you something, she said. Don't. You don't even know don't care. Your past is your business. This affects you. Then save it for the cabin. Nothing to be done about it out here anyway. Elena opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, nodded, drank her coffee, and said nothing more. The third day brought them into high country that barely qualified as Earth, more rock and ice than anything living could tolerate. The trail, such as it was, clung to cliff faces and crossed canyons on snow bridges that could collapse without warning. Elena rode behind him with her eyes closed, trusting the horse, trusting him, because looking down meant seeing death waiting patient as stone. Late afternoon, they crested a ridge, and there it was. The cabin perched on a plateau overlooking a valley that dropped away into nothing. One room, rough timber, roof weighted with stones against the wind, smoke hole in the center, a lean-to for the horse. Nothing fancy, nothing welcoming, a place to survive, not live. Home, Silas said. The word tasted strange. He dismounted, helped Elena down. She stood staring at the cabin like it might disappear. It's so far from everything, she whispered. That's the point. Inside, the cabin was cold as a tomb and twice as inviting. One room, maybe 20 feet square. A stone fireplace on the north wall. A cot with moldy blankets. A table made from half a stump. Shelves holding canned goods and ammunition. Everything covered in dust and mouse droppings. Elena walked to the center and turned slowly, taking it in. How long have you lived here? 7 years, give or take. Alone? Yeah. She looked at him. That's a long time to be alone. Silas busied himself building a fire. You get used to it. But as the flames caught and warmth slowly returned to the dead space, as Elena moved around examining the meager supplies and broken furniture, as life, human life, pushed back against the silence for the first time in years, Silas wondered if that was true. Maybe you never got used to it. Maybe you just forgot what the alternative felt like. The fire burned high now, filling the cabin with light and heat. Elena stood at the one small window, looking out at the valley disappearing into darkness. I'm pregnant, she said without turning around. Silas stopped mid-motion, coffee pot in hand. That why they were selling you? Part of it. She pressed her hand against the glass. The father was Victor Mercer's son, Charles. He died 3 months ago, fell drunk down a mine shaft. Silas set the coffee pot down carefully. Mercer know? Not yet. But he will. And when he does, her voice cracked. That baby is his only heir, the last of his bloodline. He'll take it from me. One way or another, he'll take it. So you ran. I tried. Thomas found me, brought me back, sold me to pay his debts. Silas stared into the fire, processing. This changed things, changed everything. Mercer wouldn't let this go. Rich men never let go of what they considered theirs. How far along, he asked. 4 months? Maybe 5. You should have told me before we left. She turned then, eyes fierce despite the tears on her cheeks. Would it have changed anything? Would you have left me there? Would he? Silas looked at this woman, pregnant, alone, hunted by one of the most powerful men in Colorado territory, and knew the truth. No, he wouldn't have left her. Couldn't have. Some things were beyond logic, beyond self-preservation. Some things you did because not doing them meant you were already dead inside. No, he said quietly. Wouldn't have changed it. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. She crossed to the cot and sat, exhaustion finally catching up. What am I going to do? She whispered. Silas poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. Tonight, you're going to eat, sleep, get warm. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we figure it out. We? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. She heard it in his voice. We. That night, Silas gave Elena the cot and made himself a bedroll by the fire. He lay awake listening to her breathe, watching shadows dance on the walls, and wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Buying her freedom was one thing. Sheltering a pregnant woman hunted by Victor Mercer was something else entirely. The smart move was to wait out the worst of winter, then send her somewhere safe. Denver, maybe. California. Somewhere Mercer's reach didn't extend. The smart move. But Silas Crow hadn't made a smart move in 7 years. Smart moves were for people who still cared about tomorrow. People who still had something to lose. He had nothing. Was nothing. Just a ghost haunting a cabin above the clouds, waiting for death to remember he existed. Except now he had something to protect. Someone who needed him. And that changed the equation in ways he didn't fully understand yet. Outside, the wind howled like something wounded and angry. Snow began falling again, heavy and relentless. Winter was settling in for real now. No way down the mountain until spring. Just him and Elena and the secret growing inside her, trapped together in a one-room cabin, while somewhere below, Victor Mercer planned his revenge. Silas closed his eyes and tried to remember how to pray. The words wouldn't come. Hadn't come in 7 years. So he settled for a promise instead. She stays safe. Whatever it takes. However long it takes. She stays safe. The fire crackled. Elena murmured in her sleep. The mountain held them both in its frozen grip. And Silas Crow, the ghost of Dead Man's Creek, felt something he thought had died in the flames with his family. Purpose. Morning came with the kind of cold that made breathing feel like swallowing knives. Silas woke to find Elena already up, standing at the window with her arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the endless white. You sleep at all? He asked, rolling off the floor. She shook her head. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that saloon. That'll pass. Will it? Silas didn't answer because he knew better than to lie. Some things didn't pass. They just became part of the landscape you carried inside. He built up the fire and put coffee on to boil. Elena watched him move around the cabin with the efficiency of someone who'd lived alone too long. No wasted motion, no excess, anything. There's not much food, she said, looking at the shelves. Enough to get through winter if we're careful. And if we're not careful, then we get real hungry come March. She turned from the window. In the morning light, he could see how the journey had worn her down. Dark circles under her eyes, skin too pale. The bruise on her cheek had ripened to a deep purple. I can hunt, she said. My father taught me before he died. I'm not much good, but I can set snares. Trap rabbits. Silas poured coffee into 2 tin cups. In your condition? My condition doesn't make me useless. Didn't say it did. You were thinking it. I was thinking you need rest. There's a difference. Elena took the coffee, wrapped her hands around the cup. I've been resting my whole life, Silas, being the good daughter, the proper lady. Look where it got me. She had a point. Still, he said, you push too hard out here, the mountain will kill you. It doesn't care how tough you think you are. And you know this because? Because I've buried people who thought otherwise. That shut her up for a minute. She drank her coffee, made a face at how bitter it was, drank more anyway. So what do we do? She asked finally. Today, I fix what's broken. You rest. I told you. You told me. I heard you. But you can barely stand. Your feet are half frostbit, and you're carrying a child. So you're going to sit by that fire, drink coffee, and let your body remember it's still alive. He pulled on his coat. Argue if you want. Won't change what needs doing. He left before she could respond. Outside, the world had gone savage overnight. New snow had buried the lean-to halfway up. The horse stood patient in the shelter, breath steaming in the morning air. Silas spent the next hour digging out the lean-to, checking the horse for frostbite, breaking ice off the water trough. Physical work. The kind that kept you from thinking too much. But his mind wouldn't cooperate. A pregnant woman. Victor Mercer's grandchild. Spring still 4 months away at least. He'd stepped into something that would end bloody. He knew that much. Mercer wasn't the type to forgive or forget. Rich men like him viewed the world as theirs by right. Property, people, everything. The idea that some mountain ghost had stolen what belonged to him would eat at Mercer until he did something about it. Question was when, and how bad it would be. Silas finished with the horse and stood looking out at the valley. From up here, you could see for miles on clear days. Today the clouds hung low, cutting visibility to nothing. Could be an army marching up the trail, and he wouldn't know until they knocked. But nobody marched in weather like this. Nobody could. Winter was his ally. For now. When he came back inside, Elena had cleaned, or tried to. The cabin still looked like a tomb, but a slightly more organized tomb. She'd swept the floor, wiped down the table, arranged the canned goods by type. Didn't have to do that, Silas said, shaking snow off his coat. I needed something to do besides sit. Fair enough. She'd also found his books, 4 of them stacked on a high shelf covered in dust. Elena held one now, turning it over in her hands like it was something precious. Medical texts, she said. Advanced surgery, anatomy. These are serious books. Silas hung his coat on a peg. They're old. They're expensive and well used. She looked at him. You were a doctor. Was. What happened? Life? He took the book from her hands and put it back on the shelf. Doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Why? Elena sat at the table, wincing as her body reminded her of 3 days on horseback. Because I'm trapped on a mountain with a man I don't know, carrying a child whose grandfather wants it dead or stolen, and the only thing I have is whatever trust I can build. So yes, Silas, it matters. He stood there for a long moment, hands on the bookshelf, staring at spines he hadn't touched in years. I had a practice, he said finally. Down in Kansas, small town, good people. I had a wife, Mary, and a son, Jacob, 5 years old. Elena said nothing, just waited. There was a railroad coming through, land speculation. Some businessmen wanted our property, offered to buy us out. I said no. His voice went flat. They burned us out instead. I was at a patient's house when it happened, came home to find the house gone, Mary and Jacob inside. Jesus, Elena whispered. I found the men who did it. 3 of them. Took me 6 months. He turned to face her. I killed them, slow. Then I came here and stopped being human. The cabin filled with silence. Outside, wind hammered at the walls. Elena's voice came quiet. You're still human. You don't know what I did to those men. I know you saved me when you didn't have to. I know you kept me alive through that storm. I know you're feeding me, even though it means less for you. She stood, crossed to where he stood. Whatever you were, whatever you did, you're still human, still capable of good. Silas looked down at her. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, but I'm alive because of you. That counts for something. Before he could respond, she swayed, caught herself on the table, but her face went white. When'd you eat last? Silas asked. I don't. Yesterday? Day before? Sit down before you fall down. He heated beans and hardtack, made her eat even when she said she wasn't hungry. Her body needed fuel. The baby needed fuel. Everything else was negotiable. She managed half the plate before pushing it away. I can't. You're eating for two now. I'm eating for nausea and stress. There's a difference. Eat anyway. She glared at him but picked up the spoon. Got down a few more bites before giving up entirely. Happy? She asked. Thrilled. That almost got a smile out of her. Almost. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Silas woke before dawn, tended the horse, checked the perimeter, split firewood until his shoulders screamed. Elena cleaned, cooked what they had, tried to make the dead cabin feel like something other than a crypt. They didn't talk much. Nothing to say that needed saying. But slowly, in small ways, things changed. Elena found an old broom and swept the floor daily. Organized the supplies until everything had its place. Discovered a crate of candles buried under moldy furs and lined them on the shelves. The cabin began to look lived in instead of abandoned. Silas noticed but said nothing. Didn't know how to talk about it without sounding like it mattered. And it didn't matter. Come spring, she'd leave. Everything would go back to how it was. That's what he told himself anyway. One morning, a week into their cohabitation, Silas woke to find Elena crouched by the fireplace, poking through the ashes. What are you doing? He asked. Looking for the damper. The what? The damper. The flue control. She looked back at him. You've been heating this place like you're trying to smoke meat. There's supposed to be a way to regulate the draft. I just build big fires. I can tell. You're wasting half your wood. She found something in the stonework, pulled, and a metal plate shifted. The fire immediately drew better, smoke pulling straight up instead of curling into the room. There. That's how it's supposed to work. Silas stared. 7 years in this cabin, and he'd never known that existed. Where'd you learn that? He asked. My father was a blacksmith before he got too sick to work. I grew up around forges and chimneys. She stood, brushing ash off her hands. You're welcome, by the way. Didn't say thank you. You were thinking it. You can't read minds, Elena. Can't I? She smiled then, first real smile he'd seen, and for just a second the beaten-down woman from the saloon disappeared. Someone younger looked out, someone who hadn't learned yet that the world was nothing but pain. Silas turned away and pretended he needed to check the coffee. The snow kept falling. Not the violent storms of their journey up, but steady, patient accumulation. Each morning brought another foot. The lean-to disappeared. The trail vanished. The world shrank to just the cabin and the small clearing around it. They were well and truly trapped now. Elena handled it better than Silas expected. No complaints. No panic about being stuck. She just adapted, found things to do, made the best of captivity. Better than him, anyway. He'd gotten used to being able to leave when the walls closed in, walk for hours, hunt. Anything to escape the memories that lived in the corners. Now he was stuck with them. And with her. 2 weeks in, Elena found his medical kit. Proper surgeon's tools wrapped in oilcloth and buried under spare blankets. She laid them out on the table like artifacts from another civilization. These are beautiful, she said, holding up a scalpel. They're tools. They're more than that. Look at the craftsmanship, the balance. She tested the edge carefully. Still sharp, too. Haven't used them in years. Why keep them? Silas didn't have an answer for that, or didn't want to give the one he had. Elena set the scalpel down. My father used to say you can tell a man's soul by what he refuses to throw away. Your father said a lot, sounds like. He was a talker, used to drive my mother crazy. Her voice went soft. I miss that. The talking, the noise, even the arguments. She looked around the silent cabin. It's so quiet here. You get used to it. Do you? Or do you just stop noticing? Before Silas could answer, she gasped. Hand went to her belly, eyes wide. He was on his feet instantly. What's wrong? Nothing. It's... She laughed, surprised. The baby. It moved. I felt it move. Silas stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do with that information. Elena's face lit up despite everything, despite being trapped on a mountain with a stranger. despite carrying a dead man's child while his father hunted her. Here. She grabbed his hand before he could pull away and pressed it against her stomach. Wait, just wait. He almost jerked back. Almost. But something made him stay still, palm flat against the worn fabric of her dress. And there, so faint he might have imagined it, a flutter, like a bird's wing inside her. Life. Growing despite everything. Silas pulled his hand away like he'd been burned. I should check the horse, he said, and left. Outside, the cold hit him like a fist. He stood in the snow breathing hard, trying to understand the panic clawing up his throat. A baby, real, living. Jacob had moved like that. Mary used to grab Silas's hand just like Elena did, press it to her swollen belly, laugh at his wonder. 7 years he'd run from those memories. 7 years buried in ice and isolation. Now here they were, crawling back. That night, Elena tried to apologize. I shouldn't have. With your son, I didn't think. It's fine, Silas cut her off. It's not fine. I saw your face. Drop it, Elena. I can't just. I said drop it. She flinched, not from fear exactly, but something close. Silas saw it and felt something twist in his chest. I'm going to sleep, he said. You should too. He rolled himself in blankets by the fire and turned his back. Heard her settle onto the cot. The fire crackled, wind howled. Hours passed before her voice came from the darkness. I'm scared, she said quietly. Silas didn't turn over. I know. What if Mercer finds us? He won't. Not until spring. Maybe not even then. But if he does? Then I'll handle it? How? Same way I handle everything else. Silence. Then, by killing? If that's what it takes. More silence. Silas thought she'd fallen asleep, then, thank you for keeping me alive. You're welcome. Even if you hate having me here. He turned over then, looked across the dim cabin to where she lay curled on the cot. I don't hate having you here, he said. You don't seem happy about it either. Happy's not something I do anymore. Elena propped herself up on one elbow. What do you do? Survive. That's it. That's not living. Never said it was. She studied him in the firelight. You're punishing yourself for not being there when they died. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I know guilt. I know what it does to people. My father drank himself to death because he couldn't make enough money to save my mother from her sickness. Guilt killed him slower than any disease. That's different. Is it? Silas sat up. They died because of choices I made. Because I said no to the wrong men. I put them in danger. I got them killed. You didn't light the match. Might as well have. Elena shook her head. You can't see it, can you? You saved me from exactly the kind of men who killed your family. You're doing the opposite of what you think you did wrong. But you can't let yourself have that because then you'd have to forgive yourself. I've got nothing to forgive. Everyone has something to forgive. Silas laid back down, conversation over. Go to sleep, Elena. She did eventually. Silas didn't. Just stared at the ceiling and listened to her breathe and wondered how she'd gotten so far into his head in just 2 weeks. The next morning dawned clear. First time in days the clouds had lifted. Silas woke to find Elena already up, standing at the window. Look at this, she said. He joined her. From their plateau, the view stretched forever. Mountains marching to the horizon like frozen waves. The valley below invisible under snow. The sun turning everything gold and blinding. It's beautiful, Elena whispered. It's death. All of it. Beautiful death. Can it be both? Maybe. Silas had stopped thinking in terms of both. Things were either useful or useless, safe or dangerous, living or dead. But watching Elena's face as she took in the view, seeing wonder there instead of fear, maybe both was possible after all. I need to hunt, he said. We're low on meat. I'll come with you. No. Silas, you can't move quiet enough. You'd spook everything for miles. Then teach me. It's not. He stopped, tried again. You need to rest. I need to do something besides sit in this cabin waiting for my mind to eat itself. She turned from the window. Please, I'm going crazy in here. Silas recognized the look in her eyes, the desperation of someone trapped with their own thoughts for too long. Just to the tree line, he said finally. And if I say run, you run. No questions. Deal. They geared up in silence. Silas gave her his spare coat, still too big but better than nothing. Checked her boots, made sure she had gloves, moved around her with the same efficiency he applied to everything. You're hovering, Elena said. You're pregnant. I'm aware. Outside, the snow came up to their knees. Silas broke trail while Elena followed in his footsteps. The cold bit through every layer, but the sun made it bearable. Almost pleasant if you didn't think about the 1,000 ways the mountain could kill you. They walked for an hour before Silas saw tracks. Elk moving through yesterday. He knelt, examined the prints, read the story they told. 4 of them, he said quietly, heading toward the creek bed, maybe 6 hours old. Elena crouched beside him. How can you tell? The edges, see how they're still crisp? Fresh snow would have softened them. And the depth, he pointed. This one's bigger, bull elk. The others are cows. You hunt the bull? Depends. Bulls are bigger but tougher. Cows have better meat. He stood. But we're not hunting today, just looking. They followed the tracks anyway. Silas teaching without meaning to, pointing out sign, showing her how to read the forest. Elena absorbed everything, asked smart questions, didn't slow him down. She was tougher than she looked, tougher than she probably knew. They found where the elk had bedded down for the night. 4 depressions in the snow, still visible. The elk themselves were long gone. We could track them, Elena said. Could, but it's late. We head back now. We make the cabin before dark. And if we don't, then we freeze. Elena looked at the sky, judging time the way he'd taught her. We've got 3 hours of good light. 2.5. Still enough. For me, maybe. You're still learning how to move out here. She bristled. I'm not helpless, Silas. Never said you were. You treat me like I'm made of glass. You're carrying a child in the middle of winter on top of a mountain. Forgive me for being careful. I don't need careful. I need... She stopped, frustrated. I need to feel like I'm worth something again. Silas looked at her standing there in snow up to her knees, his too big coat hanging off her shoulders, face flushed from cold and anger and something he couldn't quite name. You're worth plenty, he said quietly. To who? My brother sold me. Charles Mercer used me and died. Victor Mercer wants to steal my baby. What exactly is my value, Silas? You're asking the wrong person. Why? Because I'm not worth anything either, so my math's probably off. That startled a laugh out of her. Bitter, but real. Pair of strays, aren't we? She said. Something like that. They stood in the snow, 2 broken people in a broken world, and for just a moment it felt like less. The walk back took longer. Elena's energy flagged halfway, and she wouldn't admit it, just pushed harder, breathing ragged. Silas slowed his pace without making it obvious. Let her keep her pride. By the time they reached the cabin, full dark had fallen. Elena collapsed on the cot without even taking off her coat. Told you, Silas said. Shut up. He smiled despite himself, built up the fire, heated soup, made her eat before she slept. Thank you, she mumbled into her bowl. For what? For not saying I told you so more than once. Night's young. She laughed, ate her soup, fell asleep before she'd even finished. Silas sat by the fire and watched her sleep. Her face had more color now than when they'd arrived. The bruise had faded to yellow-green. She looked less like something hunted and more like someone resting. The baby would show soon. Really show. Then there'd be no hiding it, no pretending things weren't getting complicated. He should have turned her away in Black Hollow, should have given her money and directions and left it at that. But he hadn't. And now she was part of this, part of whatever came next. The fire burned low. Silas added wood and settled in for another sleepless night. Tomorrow they'd need water. Wood. He needed to check the roof before the next storm, fix the shutter on the window, 100 small tasks to keep them alive. And somewhere down the mountain, Victor Mercer was planning, waiting, biding time until spring when the trails opened and armies could march. Silas closed his eyes and tried to remember what came after surviving. Couldn't. Surviving was all he'd done for 7 years, all he knew anymore. But watching Elena sleep, hearing her breathe, feeling life in the cabin again after so long, maybe there was something past survival. Maybe. The trouble started on a Tuesday. Not that days meant much anymore. Silas had been splitting wood behind the cabin when he felt it, that animal sense that something was wrong. He stopped mid-swing, axe frozen above his head, and listened. Nothing. Just wind through the pines, the distant crack of ice on the mountain. Then he saw the blood. Not much, just droplets in the snow leading from the woodpile to the cabin door. He dropped the axe and ran. Inside, Elena knelt by the fireplace, both hands pressed against her mouth. Blood seeped between her fingers. What happened? Silas crossed to her in 2 strides. She pulled her hands away. Her lip was split, bleeding freely. Bit it, wasn't paying attention, and hit my face on the mantel. Let me see. It's fine. Elena. She tilted her face up. The cut wasn't deep, but it bled like hell the way mouth wounds did. Silas grabbed a clean rag, pressed it to her lip. Hold that, don't talk. He filled a bowl with water from their dwindling supply, added a pinch of salt. Elena watched him move with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Open, he said. She did. He cleaned the wound, checked for damage to her teeth, made sure nothing was broken. His hand stayed steady, even as something twisted in his chest. You're lucky, he said finally. Could have been worse. Elena took the rag from him, held it herself. Sorry, clumsy. You've been clumsy a lot lately. I'm pregnant and exhausted. What do you expect? What he expected was for her to be more careful, to stop pushing herself so hard. But he'd learned that telling Elena to rest just made her work harder out of spite. Just watch yourself, he said instead. That afternoon, he found her scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. The cut on her lip had reopened. Blood dripped onto the wet boards. Elena, stop. I'm almost done. You're bleeding. I know. Then stop. She sat back on her heels, rag in hand, and looked at him with something like defiance. I need to do this. Why? Because if I stop moving, I'll lose my mind. Because sitting still means thinking, and thinking means remembering, and I can't. Her voice cracked. I just can't, Silas. He understood that. Understood it better than she knew. Take a break, he said quietly. 5 minutes. I don't need 5 minutes. Then you can go back to whatever this is. She relented, sat at the table while he made coffee, hands shaking slightly in her lap. The baby had really started to show now, 4 months along, maybe closer to 5. Soon she wouldn't be able to hide it from anyone. Not that there was anyone to hide it from up here. I keep seeing him, Elena said suddenly. Who? Charles, Mercer's son, the father. She stared into her coffee. He wasn't a bad man, just weak. Let his father control everything, never stood up for anything or anyone. Including you. Especially me. When I told him about the baby, she laughed bitterly. He looked so scared, like I'd announced the end of the world. Said he needed time to figure things out, then fell down that mine shaft drunk off his ass 2 days later. Silas sipped his coffee. You loved him? I thought I did. Turns out I just loved the idea of him, of someone wanting me, someone seeing me as more than a burden my parents left behind. She touched her stomach. Now I've got this. A piece of a dead man who never really cared. The baby's not him. It's his blood, his father's blood. Blood doesn't make you who you are. Choices do. Elena looked at him. Is that what you tell yourself? That your choices define you more than your history? I don't tell myself anything. I just live with what I did. And what did you do, Silas? Really? He set his cup down carefully. I killed 3 men, slow, made them suffer before they died. They burned your family alive. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it wrong either. They sat in silence. Outside, snow began falling again, always falling, like the sky couldn't help but weep. That night, Silas woke to strange sounds from Elena's cot. Not crying exactly, more like gasping, struggling for air. He was across the cabin before he'd fully processed moving. Elena? She thrashed in the blankets, eyes open, but seeing something else. somewhere else. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. "You're dreaming," Silas said, hand on her shoulder. "Wake up." She jolted awake with the scream, swinging wild. Her fist caught him across the jaw. Decent punch for someone half asleep. Silas grabbed her wrist before she could swing again. "It's me. You're safe." Elena's eyes focused. Recognition dawned. She sagged against him, breathing hard. "Sorry, I thought the saloon, they were holding me down. Nobody's holding you. You're in the cabin. You're safe." She nodded, but didn't pull away, just pressed her forehead against his chest and shook. Silas sat on the edge of the cot, still holding her wrists, not knowing what else to do. Comfort wasn't something he practiced anymore, wasn't sure he remembered how. "They keep coming back," Elena whispered. "The nightmares, every night. Sometimes I'm being sold. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes Mercer's taking the baby, and I can't stop him. He's not here. Not yet." Silas released her wrist slowly. She didn't move away, just sat there shaking while he tried to figure out how to help. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "Not really." "Okay." They sat in the dark. The fire had burned down to coals. Wind rattled the shutters. "Stay," Elena said quietly. Just until I fall back asleep. Please." Every instinct told him to leave, to put distance between them, to maintain the walls he'd built so carefully. But he stayed. Sat on the edge of her cot while she curled back under the blankets, breathing evening out as exhaustion dragged her under. Her hand found his in the dark, held tight. Silas stared at the dying fire and tried to remember the last time someone had held his hand. Mary. Had to be Mary. 7 years ago. A lifetime. When Elena's breathing finally deepened into real sleep, he tried to pull his hand free. She held tighter, even unconscious. So he stayed. Sat there all night with his hand in hers, watching shadows and wondering when he'd become someone who couldn't say no to a woman who needed him. Dawn came gray and cold. Elena woke to find Silas still there, still sitting, their hands still joined. "You stayed all night," she said. "You asked me to." "I meant an hour." Didn't specify. She almost smiled, then saw his face in the morning light, exhausted, drawn, older than his years. "You didn't sleep at all." "I don't sleep much anyway." "Silas, it's fine. Need to check the traps anyway." He pulled his hand free and stood, joints protesting. Elena caught his wrist before he could walk away. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and left. Outside, the world had gone white again. Another foot of snow overnight. Silas trudged through it to check his trap line, grateful for the cold clearing his head. He'd gotten too close. Let her in too far. That hand-holding all-night sitting nonsense, that was dangerous. Made you think things could be different. Made you forget that everyone you got close to ended up dead or worse. The traps held 2 rabbits. Not much, but enough for stew. Silas reset them and headed back, focusing on practical things. Food, water, firewood, survival. Not the way Elena had looked at him in the dark. Not the feeling of her hand in his. When he got back to the cabin, she was cooking, or trying to. The pot bubbled over and smoke filled the room. "Damn it," she muttered, yanking the pot off the fire. "What are you making?" "Mush. Supposed to be anyway. Turns out I'm terrible at this." Silas hung the rabbits and took over. Scraped out the burned mush, started fresh. Elena watched from the table, frustration written all over her face. "My mother tried to teach me," she said. "I never paid attention. Thought I'd marry someone rich enough to have cooks." "How'd that work out?" "About as well as everything else in my life." Silas stirred the pot. "You're learning." "I'm failing." "Same thing out here." That got a small laugh from her. She rested her chin on her hands and watched him work. "You're good at this, the survival thing. Had a lot of practice. How long did it take to stop feeling like you wanted to die every day?" The question hit harder than her earlier punch. Silas kept stirring, not looking at her. "I'll let you know when it happens," he said. Elena went quiet. When Silas finally looked over, she had her hand on her stomach, face distant. "I'm terrified," she said softly. "Of the baby coming, of being responsible for another life, of Mercer, of everything. Fear's not a bad thing, keeps you sharp." "Does it? Or does it just eat you from the inside until there's nothing left? Silas had no answer for that. Poured mush into bowls, and they ate in silence. The days blurred together after that. Snow, cold, the endless work of staying alive. But something had shifted between them. Elena stopped pretending to be fine. Silas stopped pretending he wanted to be alone. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings, Silas hunted or gathered wood while Elena cleaned and cooked. Afternoons, they'd sit by the fire and talk. Or not talk. Just exist together in the quiet. Elena told him about her childhood, her father's blacksmith shop, her mother's garden, the way Thomas used to be before gambling ate him alive. Silas told her almost nothing, but he listened, and somehow that was enough. 3 weeks after the nightmares started, Silas went out to check the traps and came back feeling wrong. Dizzy. Hot, despite the cold. "You okay?" Elena asked when he stumbled through the door. "Fine." "You don't look fine." "Just tired." He made it to the fireplace before his legs gave out. Elena caught him before he hit the floor, barely. He outweighed her by nearly 100 pounds. "Silas!" He tried to stand, couldn't. The room spun. "Fine," he slurred. You need a doctor." "Can't get one. Middle of nowhere." "Then I'll have to do." She managed to get him onto the cot, pulled off his coat and shirt. That's when she saw it. The wound ran along his left side, just below his ribs. Old, at least 2 weeks, festering now, red and swollen, leaking pus. "When did this happen?" Elena demanded. Silas tried to remember. "Fell. Week ago, maybe more, caught a branch. And you didn't say anything?" Didn't seem important. Didn't seem, "Silas, this is infected. Badly infected. You could die from this." "Probably won't." "That's not—" She stopped. Took a breath. Okay. I need your medical kit." "Where is it?" He told her. She found it, laid out the instruments with shaking hands. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "You know more than you think. Your father, you said he taught you things. Basic field medicine, setting bones, stitching cuts, not surgery." "Not surgery, just cleaning." His words came slower now, the fever rising. "Hot water, clean the wound, drain the infection." "Silas!" "Trust yourself, Elena. You can do this." He passed out before she could argue. Elena stared at the unconscious man on the cot, at the infected wound that could kill him, at the medical instruments she barely knew how to use. She'd watched her father work on injured miners, watched him clean wounds, drain abscesses, sew flesh back together. Never thought she'd need those memories, but she'd never thought about a lot of things that had happened anyway. She boiled water, cleaned the instruments, took a scalpel in trembling hands, and went to work. The infection was worse than it looked from outside. Silas's body had walled it off as best it could, but poison had already spread into his system. Elena opened the wound, drained the pus, cleaned everything she could reach. Silas jerked once, moaning, but didn't wake. She stitched him back together with uneven sutures that would have made any real doctor cringe. But they held. That's what mattered. Then came the hard part. Waiting, watching, hoping the fever broke before it killed him. The first night was the worst. Silas burned like a furnace, delirious, calling out names Elena didn't know. Mary, Jacob, others. His fever dreams played out loud enough that she heard his whole history in broken fragments. The fire, the screaming, finding their bodies, tracking the men who did it, watching them beg, the violence he'd done, the blood on his hands, the way he'd stopped being human and become something else. Elena sat beside him all night, cooling his forehead with wet rags, forcing water between his lips when she could. "Don't you dare die," she whispered. "You saved me. Now I'm saving you. That's how this works." The second night, his fever spiked higher. He thrashed so hard she had to hold him down to keep him from tearing his stitches. "Mary, get Jacob out," he gasped. "The fire, Mary, please." "Silas, wake up. You're dreaming." But he couldn't hear her. Lost somewhere in the past, watching his family burn over and over. Elena climbed onto the cot beside him, held him like she'd held her father when the drink made him shake, held tight and whispered things that probably didn't matter, but maybe did anyway. "You're not there. You're here. You're safe. I've got you." Sometime before dawn, the fever broke. Silas went still, His breathing evened out. The delirium faded. Elena pressed her hand to his forehead. Cool. Not cold, just normal. She nearly cried from relief. When Silas woke, late morning sun streamed through the window. He felt like he'd been stomped by horses. But he felt. That meant alive. Elena sat at the table, head pillowed on her arms, asleep, sitting up. Elena, he rasped. She jerked awake, crossed to him in an instant. You're awake. How do you feel? Like death. Close enough. You had me worried. Silas looked down at himself. New bandages. Clean. The wound throbbed, but the sick heat was gone. You did this? Didn't have much choice. You knew what to do. I knew enough. My father taught me field medicine before he died. Never thought I'd use it. She sat on the edge of the cot. You were delirious for 2 days. Said things. Silas closed his eyes. What things? Their names. Mary and Jacob. What happened to them? I'm sorry. Don't be. I needed to know. Needed to understand why you are the way you are. And what way is that? Elena looked at him for a long moment. Haunted, but not dead. Not yet. Silas tried to sit up. Elena pushed him back down. Don't even think about it. You're staying in that bed for at least 3 more days. Can't. Too much work. I'll handle it. You're pregnant. And you're recovering from a wound that nearly killed you, so I win. She had him there. Over the next few days, Elena took over everything, feeding the horse, hauling water, splitting wood with an axe she could barely lift. She was terrible at most of it, but she did it anyway. Silas watched from the cot, too weak to help, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. Real, bone-deep gratitude that someone gave a damn if he lived or died. On the 4th day, he finally convinced her to let him sit up. They shared coffee at the table like normal people. Almost. I need to tell you something, Elena said. All right. When you were fevered, you told me what you did to those men, the ones who killed your family. Silas went still. And I need you to know that I don't care. Whatever you did, whatever you think makes you a monster, I don't care. You're the best man I've met, maybe the only good man. You haven't met many men then? I've met plenty, trust me on that. She reached across the table, took his hand. You saved my life. You're keeping me alive. You're giving me a chance to have this baby somewhere safe. That's what matters, not what you did 7 years ago. Silas looked at their joined hands. You don't know what I'm capable of. Yes, I do. I saw you in that saloon. Saw what everyone else saw. The killer, the ghost, the monster. She squeezed his hand. But I also see this. The man who held my hand through nightmares, who nearly died because he didn't think his own wounds mattered, who gave up his home and his peace to shelter a stranger. That doesn't erase. Nothing erases anything, Silas. We just carry it and keep moving. You taught me that. He met her eyes, saw something there that terrified him more than Mercer ever could. Hope. She looked at him with hope. I can't be what you think I am, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to be anything, just to let me stay. Let me help. Let this mean something. Before Silas could answer, before he could push her away like every instinct screamed at him to do, Elena took a sharp breath. Her hand went to her stomach, eyes wide. What? Silas asked. Nothing, just baby kicked. Hard this time. Without thinking, Silas stood, came around the table. Let me see. Elena pulled up her shirt. Her belly had rounded noticeably now. Silas put his hand where she indicated and felt it, a strong thump against his palm. Life. Undeniable. Hello in there, Elena said softly, hand covering his. They stood like that, connected by a child neither of them had planned for, both broken people trying to figure out what came next. The moment stretched. Then Silas pulled his hand away, stepped back. I should rest, he said. Elena nodded, disappointment flickering across her face. Right, of course. She helped him back to the cot. Silas lay down and closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Just the feeling of that kick, that proof of life growing despite everything. That night, Elena finally said what they'd both been avoiding. When spring comes, what happens to me? Silas stared at the ceiling. What do you want to happen? I want to stay. Here? Yes. Elena, I know it's asking a lot. I know you like being alone. But I have nowhere else. And the baby, her voice caught. I can't raise a child alone. Can't protect it from Mercer. Can't give it any kind of life. You could go west, California. Somewhere far enough that Mercer can't reach. With what money? What skills? I'd end up selling myself just to eat. Is that what you want for me? I want you safe. Then let me stay. Silas turned to look at her across the dark cabin. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking you to let someone care about you again, to let yourself be more than just a ghost waiting to die. I'm not. You are. You've been half dead since I met you, going through motions, surviving, but not living. She sat up. But these last few weeks, since you got sick, you've been different, more present, more alive. That's the fever talking. No, it's not. It's you. The real you. The man you were before everything burned. Elena's voice went soft. Let him back, Silas, please. Let yourself have this. What was this? A pregnant woman who'd seen the worst of him and somehow still wanted to stay? A chance to be more than the sum of his failures? Or just another person he'd eventually lose? I don't know if I can, Silas admitted. Then let me help you figure it out. The fire crackled. Wind howled. Outside, the mountain held them in its frozen grip. And Silas Crow, the ghost who'd run from humanity for 7 years, felt the walls he'd built starting to crack. Not breaking. Not yet. But cracking. And maybe that was enough for now. The first real thaw came in late March, turning snow to slush and opening the high passes for the first time in months. Silas stood at the edge of the plateau watching water drip from the pines and knew their time was running out. It's beautiful, Elena said from behind him. She'd walked up quiet, or as quiet as a woman 7 months pregnant could manage. The ice melting, everything coming back to life. It means the trails are passable. She understood immediately. The hope in her face died. How long? Week, maybe 2 before someone could make it up here. Depends on how bad they want to find us. Mercer wants to very badly. Silas turned to look at her. The pregnancy had changed her in ways beyond the obvious. She stood different now, steadier, more grounded, like carrying life had given her something to anchor to. We should talk about what happens next, he said. I thought we already did. That was winter talk. This is different. Elena crossed her arms over her swollen belly. You're going to tell me to leave, aren't you? I'm going to tell you we need a plan. If Mercer comes, when he comes, things are going to get ugly fast. So we fight. You can't fight. Look at you. I can shoot. Not well enough. Not against the kind of men Mercer can afford. Silas looked back at the valley. I need you somewhere safe when it happens. There is nowhere safe. Not from him. You know that. She was right. Men like Victor Mercer didn't stop, didn't forgive. They just kept coming until they got what they wanted or died trying. Then we make somewhere safe, Silas said. Over the next week, he turned the cabin into something approximating a fortress, reinforced the door with extra timber, cut firing slits in the walls, stocked ammunition and supplies in strategic locations, built a root cellar under the floor where Elena could hide if things went completely wrong. She watched him work with growing dread. You're preparing for a war, she said one evening. I'm preparing for reality. There has to be another way. You see one. I'm listening. Elena didn't answer. They both knew the truth. Violence was coming, had been coming since the moment Silas walked into that saloon. Some debts could only be paid in blood. The lawman arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding alone up the mountain trail on a tired horse. Silas spotted him from a quarter-mile out and met him at the tree line with a rifle. Far enough, Silas called. The rider stopped. Mid-50s, weathered face, badge pinned to a heavy coat, U.S. Marshal by the look of him. Silas Crow, the marshal asked. Depends who's asking. Marshal Frank Hutchins out of Denver. Got a few questions if you've got time. Don't have time. Turn around. Hutchins held up empty hands. Not here for trouble, just talk. Talk from there, then. The marshal shifted in his saddle. Victor Mercer filed a complaint. Says you kidnapped his daughter-in-law. That true? Bought her freedom from her brother, got witnesses. Mercer tells it different, says you took advantage of a mentally unfit woman, absconded with property that belonged to him. She's not property. Legally speaking, the child she's carrying might be. Mercer's grandchild, his heir. Law gets complicated when blood and money mix. Silas kept the rifle level. She stays with me. That her choice or yours? Mine, Elena called from the cabin doorway. She stood there, hand on the frame, belly prominent under her dress. I'm staying here by choice, Marshal. Silas Crow saved my life. He's done nothing wrong. Hutchins studied her. Ma'am, are you being held against your will? No. Are you free to leave if you choose? Yes, but I won't. This is where I want to be. The Marshal sighed. Miss, I don't know what story you've been told, but the man you're defending has a history. 7 years ago in Kansas, I know his history, Elena interrupted. All of it doesn't change anything. Hutchins looked between them. This is a mistake. Both of you know that, right? Mercer's not going to let this go. He's got money and men in the law mostly on his side. Then he should have raised a better son, Elena said coldly. One who didn't get drunk and fall down a mine shaft after getting a girl pregnant and doing nothing about it. That's not... Hutchins stopped, rubbed his face. Look, I'm not here to judge anybody's life choices. I'm here to offer you a way out that doesn't end with people dead. I'm listening, Silas said. Come down to Denver, both of you. We'll get this sorted legal-like. Mercer wants the child, fine. We'll figure out custody arrangements. But it gets done in a courtroom, not on a mountain with guns. Mercer gets my baby over my dead body, Elena said. That's what I'm trying to prevent, ma'am. Silas lowered the rifle slightly. We go to Denver. Mercer owns that town. He owns the judges, the law, everything. We'd be walking into a cage. Maybe. But at least you'd be alive. For how long? Hutchins had no answer for that. He sat his horse for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I tried. When this goes bad, and it will go bad, don't say nobody gave you an out. He turned his horse. For what it's worth, Crow, I looked into what happened in Kansas. Those men deserved what they got. But you can't keep running from civilization. Eventually, it catches up. Let it try. The Marshal rode away. Silas watched until he disappeared into the trees, then walked back to the cabin. Elena stood in the doorway, shaking. He's coming, isn't he? Mercer? Yeah. When? Soon as Hutchins reports back that we won't come peaceful. She pressed her hand to her stomach. The baby's due in 6 weeks, maybe less. I can feel it getting ready. Silas looked at her. This woman who'd become more than a responsibility, more than someone to protect. When had that happened? When had she stopped being a stranger and become something he couldn't name? We'll handle it, he said. How? Same way I handle everything, by not dying. That got a weak laugh from her. Is that your strategy for everything? Worked so far. 3 days later, they came. Silas spotted the dust first, far down the valley. Too much for one rider, too organized for trappers or hunters. Elena, he called. Root cellar, now! She appeared from behind the cabin where she'd been hanging laundry. What is it? Company, the kind that doesn't knock. Her face went white. Already? Mercer doesn't waste time. Get below. I can help. You can stay alive. That's how you help. For once, she didn't argue. Just moved as fast as her pregnant body allowed, climbing down into the hidden cellar beneath the cabin floor. Silas lowered the boards over her and scattered the rug to hide the seams. Stay quiet no matter what you hear, he said through the cracks. Don't come out until I say. Silas, promise me. I promise. He grabbed his rifle and took position by the window, counted the riders as they climbed into view. 8 men, all armed, all hired muscle by the look of them. Victor Mercer rode at the center, expensive coat and hat making him stand out like a peacock among crows. The mine owner looked older than Silas remembered, but meaner too. Money and grief had hardened him into something bitter. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Mercer dismounted, flanked by his men. Silas Crow, he called. I'd like my property back. Silas opened the door, rifle in hand. Nothing here belongs to you. The girl does. The child certainly does. My blood, My legacy. She's not here. Mercer smiled. Really? Then you won't mind if we look around. I mind. You're trespassing. Turn around while you still can. Or what? You'll shoot us all? There's 8 of us and 1 of you. The math doesn't favor heroics. Math's never been my strong suit. One of Mercer's men, big, scarred, mean-looking, spat in the snow. Just give us the girl, Mountain Man. Save yourself the trouble. Why don't you come take her? The mercenary reached for his gun. Silas shot him through the shoulder before the weapon cleared leather. The man went down screaming. The other 7 scattered, diving for cover. Mercer backpedaled to his horse. That was a mistake, Mercer shouted from behind a tree. First of many, Silas called back. He levered another round. Next man who moves toward this cabin dies. No warning shot. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the mercenaries made a break for better cover. Silas tracked him, fired. The bullet caught the man in the leg and he collapsed, howling. 2 down, Silas announced. 6 to go. You're insane, Mercer screamed. Been told that before. Bullets started flying then. The mercenaries opened up, pouring lead into the cabin. Silas dropped below the window as rounds punched through the walls, showering him with splinters. Below in the root cellar, he could hear Elena's muffled gasp. She was terrified but staying quiet. Good. Silas crawled to a different firing slit, popped up, squeezed off 3 quick shots. Didn't hit anyone but made them duck. Bought time. The shooting stopped. Reload time. Silas used it to reposition again. Crow, Mercer called. Be reasonable. You can't win this. Don't need to win, just need to make it expensive. I'll pay whatever it takes. Some things aren't for sale. More gunfire. Silas returned it methodically, making each shot count. Another mercenary went down clutching his arm. 3 wounded now, 5 still fighting. But Silas was 1 man in a wooden cabin. They'd wear him down eventually. Flank him. Burn him out. He needed to change the equation. During the next reload, Silas grabbed the oil lamp from the table, lit the wick, opened the door, and threw it hard toward the nearest cluster of mercenaries. The lamp shattered against a tree, and fire bloomed. Not much, but enough to make them scramble away from the flames. In the confusion, Silas burst from the cabin and sprinted for the tree line. Bullets chased him, but accuracy suffered when people were panicking. He made the trees, circled wide, came up behind Mercer's position. The mine owner knelt behind a boulder, shouting orders at his remaining men. Didn't see Silas until the rifle barrel pressed against his skull. Call them off, Silas said quietly. Mercer froze. You're making this worse. I'm making it simple. Call them off, or I paint this rock with your brains. They won't stop just because Silas cocked the rifle. Try anyway. Mercer's voice shook when he shouted. Stand down! Everybody stand down! The shooting tapered off. The mercenaries emerged from cover, confused, until they saw their employer with a gun to his head. Drop your weapons, Silas ordered. They hesitated. One of them, younger, stupider, raised his pistol. Don't, Mercer gasped. For the love of heaven, don't. The young mercenary fired anyway. Silas jerked Mercer sideways, and the bullet meant for Silas caught the mine owner in the shoulder instead. Mercer screamed. The other mercenaries opened fire on their own man, cutting him down in a crossfire of panic and stupidity. Then everyone stopped, horrified at what they'd just done. Silas used the chaos to drag Mercer toward the cabin. The mine owner bled freely, moaning with each step. You're all dead, Mercer shrieked at his men. All of you. I'll see you hang. The remaining mercenaries looked at each other, looked at their wounded employer, looked at the mountain ghost who'd just made fools of them all. Then they ran, just mounted up and rode away, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Silas watched them go, then dragged Mercer into the cabin and kicked the door shut. Elena, it's over. You can come out. The floorboards lifted. Elena emerged, pale and shaking, and saw Victor Mercer bleeding on the floor. Oh no, she whispered. He's not dying, Silas said. Unfortunately. Mercer clutched his shoulder. You shot me. Your own man shot you. I just moved you into it. Semantics. Reality. Elena stood frozen, staring at the man who'd haunted her nightmares for months. What do we do with him? Good question. Silas could finish it right here. 1 bullet. Problem solved. Mercer dead meant no more threats, no more mercenaries, no more danger, but it also meant no going back. Murder was murder, justified or not. And looking at Elena's face, seeing the hope she still carried despite everything, Silas couldn't do it. "We patch him up," he said. "Then we send him down the mountain." "You're crazy," Mercer gasped. "I'll come back with more men, better men. I'll burn this whole mountain to find her." Silas knelt beside him. "You could do that. Or you could listen." "To what?" "To the deal I'm offering. You leave us alone, completely, forever. In exchange, the child gets to know who their grandfather is. Letters. Maybe visits when they're older if they want. You get to be part of their life without owning it." "That's not... I know what you want. You want control. Want to shape this child into your image because your son died without giving you that chance. But that's not how this works." Mercer's face twisted with rage and grief. "Charles was weak. I failed him. I won't fail his child." "Then don't. Be better than you were with him. Be someone worth knowing instead of someone worth running from." Elena moved closer. "I won't keep your grandchild from you, but I won't let you take them either. We stay here. Raise them here. Away from your world. And maybe, if you can prove you've changed, you get to be a part of that." "And if I refuse?" Silas pressed the rifle barrel against Mercer's chest. "Then you don't leave this cabin alive, and your legacy dies with you." Mercer looked between them, saw the determination in Elena's eyes, saw the barely controlled violence in Silas's, did the math and didn't like his odds. "Fine," he said finally. "Fine. You keep the child. Raise it however you want. Just..." His voice cracked. "Just let me know them. Please. It's all I have left of Charles." Elena's expression softened slightly. "If you truly mean it, then yes. But you try to take them, even once, and you'll never see them again. Silas will make sure of that." "Oh, I believe that." Silas stood. "Elena, get my medical kit." She did. Together they cleaned Mercer's wound. The bullet had gone clean through, missing anything vital. Silas stitched him up with the same efficiency he'd done everything else. "You were a doctor," Mercer said, watching Silas work. "A long time ago. Why'd you stop?" "Someone burned my family alive. Seemed like a good reason to quit." Mercer went quiet after that. When the bandaging was done, Silas helped the mine owner onto his horse. The wounded mercenaries had fled already, leaving trails of blood down the mountain. "Go," Silas said, "and remember our agreement." Mercer gathered his reins, looked at Elena one more time. "The child. Will it be safe here?" "Safer than anywhere else," she said. "And happy?" Elena's hand went to her belly. "I'll do everything I can to make sure of that." Mercer nodded, turned his horse, stopped. "Crow," he said without looking back, "thank you for not killing me. Most men would have. Most men aren't trying to be better than they were." The mine owner rode away, hunched over his wound, and disappeared into the trees. Silas and Elena stood in the clearing, surrounded by bullet-riddled walls and blood-stained snow, and waited to see if he'd come back. He didn't. That night, Silas sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle, while Elena made what passed for dinner. The cabin looked like a war zone. Bullet holes everywhere, broken furniture, the smell of gunpowder still thick in the air. "We should fix the walls before the next storm," Elena said. "We should. And bury the dead." "Already did while you were cooking." She set a bowl in front of him. "Do you think he meant it, Mercer, about leaving us alone?" "Don't know. Hope so." "And if he didn't?" Silas looked up at her. "The next time I won't hesitate." Elena sat across from him, hand on her belly. "The baby's moving a lot tonight. I think all the excitement got them riled up." "Probably didn't help." "No." She smiled slightly. "But they're strong, kicking like they want out right now." "Not yet. Got a few more weeks." "Tell them that." They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, night settled over the mountain. Somewhere down below, Victor Mercer rode toward whatever was left of his life. Behind him, 8 men had tried to take what wasn't theirs and learned the price. "Silas," Elena said quietly, "thank you for not killing him. I know it would have been easier. Maybe you could have ended all of this. One bullet. Could have, but you would have seen it. The baby would have been born knowing I murdered their grandfather. Some prices aren't worth paying. Elena reached across the table, took his hand. You're a good man. We've been over this. I'm not. Then what are you? Silas looked at their joined hands, at this woman who'd changed everything without meaning to, at the life growing inside her that wasn't his but felt like it anyway. I'm trying, he said finally. That's all I've got. That's enough. Later, as Elena slept and Silas kept watch by the dying fire, he thought about the choice he'd made. Letting Mercer live, offering mercy to a man who deserved none. The old Silas would have killed him without blinking, would have killed them all and slept soundly after. But that Silas had died somewhere between Black Hollow and here. Between buying a woman's freedom and holding her hand through nightmares. Between hunting to feed her and watching her belly swell with life. He'd become someone different, someone who could choose mercy over vengeance, who could see a future beyond survival, someone almost human again. Elena stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't hear. Silas crossed to the cot, made sure she was covered, adjusted the blanket without waking her. She looked peaceful, safe, like she trusted him completely. That terrified him more than Mercer's guns ever could, because trust meant responsibility, meant caring about tomorrow, meant having something to lose again. And loss was what had destroyed him the first time. But watching Elena sleep, feeling the cabin warm around them despite the bullet holes, Silas made a decision. He'd risk it. Risk caring. Risk loss. Risk everything. Because the alternative, going back to being a ghost waiting to die, wasn't living at all. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to live again. The contraction started 3 weeks early, in the middle of repairing the cabin's south wall. Elena dropped the hammer and grabbed the door frame, face going white. Silas, he was beside her in seconds. What's wrong? The baby, it's... She gasped as another wave hit. It's coming. Now? You said 3 more weeks. Babies don't check calendars. She tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. Help me inside. Silas half carried her to the cot. His mind raced through everything he remembered from medical school, from delivering Jacob, from the few births he'd attended as a country doctor. None of it felt adequate now. How far apart are the pains? He asked. I don't know, 5 minutes? Maybe less? That's fast for a first baby. Well, this baby didn't get the message. Another contraction hit. Elena's fingers dug into Silas's arm hard enough to leave marks. When it passed, she looked up at him with fear in her eyes. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. What if something goes wrong? Nothing's going wrong. I've done this before. Once. 7 years ago. Muscle memory. He tried to sound confident. Wasn't sure he succeeded. You're strong, healthy. The baby's been active. Everything points to normal. Normal. She laughed weakly. Nothing about this situation is normal. She had a point there. Silas spent the next hour preparing. Boiled water. Laid out clean linens. Found his medical instruments and sterilized them over the fire. Tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Infection. Hemorrhage. Breech presentation. Cord wrapped around the neck. He'd seen all of it, fought all of it, lost patience to all of it despite his best efforts. But this was Elena, and this baby, this child that wasn't his but felt like it anyway, deserved better than his fear. Talk to me, Elena said between contractions. I need distraction. About what? Anything. Tell me about Kansas, before the fire. What was it like? Silas sat on the edge of the cot, monitoring her pulse. Small town, good people mostly, had a practice above the general store. Mary kept the books. Jacob played in the office while I worked. What was she like? Mary? He didn't talk about Mary. Hadn't in 7 years. But Elena needed the distraction, and maybe he needed to remember that life had been good once. Stubborn, he said. Like you. Wouldn't take no for an answer. When we met, I was barely scraping by. She decided I needed help whether I wanted it or not. Showed up one day with account books and a plan to organize my disaster of a practice. And you fell in love. Took longer than that. I was too proud to admit I needed her. She was too smart to care what I admitted. She just kept showing up until I couldn't imagine life without her. Elena smiled through the pain. Sounds familiar. Does, doesn't it? Another contraction, harder this time. Elena's breathing changed, became shallow and rapid. "That's it," Silas said. "Breathe through it. Don't fight the pain, just let it happen." "Easy for you to say. Had a kidney stone once. Not the same, but close enough." That got a laugh from her, which turned into a groan as the contraction peaked. Hours crawled by. The contractions intensified, closer together, each one hitting Elena like a physical blow. Silas stayed beside her, wiping her forehead, talking her through each wave, checking her progress. "I can't do this," she gasped during a particularly bad one. "You're already doing it." "It hurts too much." "I know, but pain means progress. Means the baby's coming. I want it to stop." "Can't stop now. Too late for that." She glared at him through sweat-soaked hair. "I hate you right now." "Most women say that during labor. You're in good company." "Did Mary hate you?" "Oh yeah, called me every name she could think of. Some I'd never heard before." "Good for her." Twilight came. The cabin filled with shadows. Silas lit candles and kept working, kept monitoring, kept praying to whatever might be listening that this would end well. Elena's water broke around midnight. After that, things accelerated fast. "I need to push," she gasped. Silas checked. The baby had crowned. "Not yet. Pant through the next one." Short breaths. "I can't." "You can. Look at me, Elena. Focus on my voice. Pant." She did, though every instinct screamed at her to push. Silas watched the baby's head appear, rotate, position itself. Everything looked normal so far. "All right," he said. "Next contraction, you push. Everything you've got." The contraction hit like a freight train. Elena bore down, screaming through clenched teeth. The baby's head emerged fully, face purple and compressed. "Stop," Silas ordered. He checked quickly. No cord around the neck. "One more. Big push." Elena pushed. The shoulders came free. Then in a rush of blood and fluid, the baby slid into Silas's waiting hands. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. The baby lay still, blue, silent. Silas's heart stopped. Not again. Please, not again. He cleaned the baby's mouth and nose, rubbed its back vigorously. "Come on, breathe." Nothing. Elena raised her head, saw the motionless infant, and her face crumpled. No, please." Silas turned the baby over, put his mouth over its tiny nose and mouth, gave 2 gentle breaths. The baby jerked, coughed, and started crying. The sound filled the cabin like music. The baby's color shifted from blue to pink, limbs waving in protest at this cold, bright new world. "It's a boy," Silas said, his voice rough. "You have a son." Elena collapsed back, sobbing with relief. Silas clamped and cut the cord with shaking hands, then wrapped the baby in clean linen and placed him on Elena's chest. She cradled him close, tears streaming down her face. "He's beautiful. He's perfect." The baby wasn't perfect. He was red and wrinkled and covered in vernix, but he was alive and healthy and screaming his lungs out, and that was better than perfect. Silas delivered the afterbirth, checked Elena for tearing, minor, nothing that needed stitching, and cleaned up the mess. His hands moved automatically while his mind tried to process what had just happened. A baby. New life. In this cabin where he'd come to die, life had arrived anyway. When everything was done, when Elena had fed the baby and both had fallen into exhausted sleep, Silas sat by the fire and let himself shake. That moment when the baby wouldn't breathe, he'd been back in Kansas watching Jacob take his first breath, feeling that overwhelming terror and joy mixed together. 7 years had passed, but the memory was fresh as yesterday. "Thank you," Elena whispered from the cot. Silas looked over. She was awake, the baby asleep on her chest. "For what?" "For saving him. When he wouldn't breathe. You knew what to do. Just training. It was more than that. You brought him back." Silas didn't know what to say to that. Walked over and looked down at the sleeping infant. So small, so fragile, so completely dependent on the broken people around him. "What are you going to name him?" he asked. Elena thought for a moment. "I was thinking, if it's all right with you, I'd like to call him Jacob, after your son." Silas's throat tightened. "You don't have to do that." "I want to. You gave me a second chance at life. Let me give your son's name a second chance, too." He sat heavily on the edge of the cot, looking at this woman who'd somehow seen past every wall he'd built and decided he was worth saving anyway. Jacob, he said quietly, it's a good name. It is. The baby stirred, made small noises. Elena adjusted him gently. What happens now? She asked. Now you rest. Heal. Get your strength back. I mean after that. Do we stay here? Raise him on this mountain? Silas looked around the bullet-riddled cabin. You want to? I don't know. Part of me wants to run as far from civilization as possible, keep him safe from everything. But the other part, she stroked the baby's head. The other part knows he'll need more than this eventually. School, friends, a future. That's years away. We've got time to figure it out. Do we? What if Mercer comes back? What if more men come? Then we handle it, same as before. Elena shook her head. I don't want him growing up around violence, around fear. I want him to have what I never did. Stability, safety, a chance to just be a kid. Out here, he can be whatever he wants, no expectations, no society telling him who to be. Or no opportunities, no doctors if he gets sick, no law if someone tries to hurt him. They'd had versions of this conversation before, but it felt different now, more urgent, more real. What do you want, Elena? Silas asked. Really want? She looked at the baby, then at Silas. I want him to grow up knowing he's loved. That's it. Everything else we can figure out. Then that's what we'll give him. Spring fully arrived over the next few weeks, transforming the mountain from frozen wasteland to something almost beautiful. Flowers pushed through melting snow. Animals emerged from hibernation. The world came back to life. Inside the cabin, Elena recovered slowly. Silas handled everything, cooking, cleaning, caring for the horse, keeping watch. At night, when Jacob cried, Silas would rock him while Elena slept, walking circles around the small cabin and humming songs he'd forgotten he knew. You're good with him, Elena said one morning, watching Silas change the baby's cloth diaper with surprising competence. Had practice. Still, most men wouldn't... She stopped. Most men would have left us at Black Hollow, or sent us away when winter ended. You keep choosing to stay. Maybe I like the company. Do you? Silas finished with the diaper and picked Jacob up. The baby grabbed his finger with a grip stronger than seemed possible for something so small. Yeah, Silas admitted. I do. Even though it's complicated, even though Mercer might still come back, even though I come with more baggage than a freight wagon. Especially because of all that. Elena crossed to him, stood close. Why? Because before you showed up, I was already dead. Just hadn't stopped breathing yet. You changed that. Made me remember what it felt like to be alive. He looked down at Jacob. Both of you did. So what does that make us? To you? Silas thought about it. Family felt too presumptuous. Friends too distant. Something else then. Something he didn't have words for. You're my reason, he said finally. For getting up, for staying, for trying to be better than I was. Elena's eyes filled with tears. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Wasn't trying to be romantic. I know. That's what makes it perfect. She kissed him then. Soft, brief, but full of meaning. When she pulled back, Silas stood frozen, baby in arms, wondering what the hell had just happened. Was that... Did you mean... He stammered. Yes, to whatever you're trying to ask. I'm not... I can't be... What you were. I know. I don't want who you were. I want who you are now. This man. The one holding my son and trying to figure out how to fix a broken cabin with bullet holes. The one who saved me and kept me alive and delivered my baby when nobody else could. Elena, I'm still... There's still so much... She pressed a finger to his lips. I know. You're haunted. Broken. Probably always will be on some level. But so am I. So that's something we have in common. Jacob squirmed between them, making unhappy noises. Elena took him and started nursing while Silas tried to process what had just happened. I don't know how to do this, he said. Do what? This. Us. Family. I failed at it once, catastrophically. You didn't fail. Evil men killed your family. That's not the same thing. I should have protected them. You were human. Humans make mistakes. What matters is what you do after. And what have I done? Run away. Hid on a mountain. Became a ghost. And then you came back, saved someone who needed saving, became human again. Elena shifted Jacob to her other breast. That's redemption, Silas. That's what it looks like. He sat at the table, head in his hands. What if I lose you, both of you? What if something happens and I can't? Then we'll deal with it, together. But you can't live in fear of loss. That's not living at all. It's safer. It's lonely. And you've been lonely long enough. Silas looked at her, this impossible woman who'd walked into his life during a snowstorm and refused to leave even when she should have, who'd seen every ugly part of him and decided he was worth keeping anyway. I love you, he said. The words felt rusty, unpracticed, but true. Elena smiled. I know. Been waiting for you to figure that out. How long? Since you held my hand through nightmares, maybe before. And you love me? Would I have kissed you otherwise? Fair point. Jacob finished nursing, and Elena burped him, the domestic scene so normal it felt surreal. 6 months ago, Silas had been alone on this mountain waiting to die. Now he was watching a woman burp a baby and talking about love like it was something he deserved. Life was strange. A week later, a rider appeared on the trail. Silas saw him coming and reached for his rifle, but Elena stopped him. Wait. Look at what he's carrying. The rider had a white flag tied to a stick. He stopped at the tree line and called out, Mr. Crow, Miss Elena, I come with a message from Victor Mercer. Silas stepped out, rifle ready anyway. Close enough. The rider, young, nervous, clearly not a fighter, held up a letter. Mr. Mercer asked me to deliver this, said it was important. Toss it here. The rider did. The letter landed in the snow halfway between them. That's all, the young man said. I'm leaving now. No trouble. He rode away fast. Silas retrieved the letter and brought it inside. Elena sat with Jacob looking worried. What does it say? Silas opened it and read aloud. Mr. Crow and Miss Elena, I've had time to think about our encounter, about what was said, about what I want versus what I need. I'm writing to tell you that I meant what I agreed to. You keep the child. Raise him as you see fit. I won't interfere. But I'm asking, not demanding, asking if you would allow me to visit. Once a year, perhaps. Just to see my grandson. To know him. I've enclosed funds for the child's care. No strings attached. Just a grandfather trying to be better than he was as a father. Respectfully, Victor Mercer. Sat situm ar shamri ayin. A bank draft fell out of the envelope. $500. Elena and Silas looked at each other. He's serious, she said. Seems like. What do we do? Silas thought about it. About revenge versus mercy. About cycles of violence versus breaking them. About what kind of world they wanted Jacob to grow up in. We write back, he said. Tell him he can visit, once a year, supervised. Any sign he's trying to take Jacob and the deal's off permanently. You think he'll honor that? I think he's a lonely old man who lost his son and wants a second chance. Whether he deserves it or not. Silas shrugged. Everyone deserves a second chance. That's what you taught me. Elena smiled and reached for his hand. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. They wrote the letter that evening. Silas's handwriting was terrible from years of disuse, but the message was clear. Mercer could visit, could be part of Jacob's life, but only on their terms. A week later, another writer brought a response. Just 2 words. Thank you. Summer arrived in full. The cabin slowly transformed from a fortress back into a home. Silas repaired the bullet holes, replaced broken furniture, even built a cradle for Jacob out of pine wood. Elena planted a garden in the clearing, vegetables, herbs, wildflowers. It probably wouldn't produce much this first year, but it was a start, a claim on the future. We should get married, Silas said one evening while watching her water the seedlings. Elena looked up, surprised. Is that a proposal? More like a statement of fact. We're raising a child together, living together, loving each other. Seems like marriage is the next logical step. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. Want me to try again? No. I like it honest. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. Yes, I'll marry you. But we do it right. Find a preacher somehow. Make it legal. Nearest preacher is probably 2 days' ride. Then we take 2 days. I'm not starting this family on a technicality. They made the trip a month later. Jacob bundled against Elena's chest, found a circuit preacher in a mining camp, and got married in a tent church with strangers as witnesses. It wasn't fancy, wasn't traditional, but standing there with Elena's hand in his, promising to love and protect her and Jacob, Silas felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Complete. Like all the broken pieces had finally found a way to fit together again. That fall, Victor Mercer made his first visit. He rode up alone, unarmed, looking older and smaller than Silas remembered. Elena met him in the clearing, holding Jacob. Silas stood nearby, ready to intervene if needed. "Mr. Mercer," Elena said formally. "Elena, and you must be—" Mercer's voice broke, looking at the baby. "You must be Jacob. He's 4 months old, healthy, happy. Could I hold him?" Elena looked at Silas. He nodded slightly. She handed Jacob over. Mercer took the baby like he was made of glass, tears streaming down his weathered face. "He has Charles's eyes. And his nose. He has my stubbornness," Elena said. "Cries when he doesn't get his way. All babies do that. This one's exceptional at it." Mercer laughed through his tears, held Jacob for 10 minutes, talking softly to him before handing him back. "Thank you," he said to Elena. Then to Silas, "Both of you, for this, for him, for not—" He couldn't finish. "You're welcome," Silas said. "Same time next year?" "I'd like that very much." Mercer rode away and didn't look back. Silas watched him go and felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for what Mercer had lost, but for all the years he'd wasted being the wrong kind of father. At least he was trying now. That counted for something. Winter came again, but this time the cabin was full of life, Jacob's cries, Elena's singing, the sounds of family. Silas still had nightmares sometimes, still woke up thinking he smelled smoke. But Elena would be there, warm beside him, and the fear would fade. One night during a particularly bad dream, he woke to find her watching him. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just ghosts. They'll always be there, won't they? Mary and Jacob." "Yeah." "Good. They should be. They were part of your life, part of who you are." Pressed closer. "But they don't have to be all of you anymore." "No, they don't." He held her until they both fell back asleep, and the ghost stayed quiet. Spring returned. Jacob took his first steps in the clearing, stumbling through new grass while Elena clapped, and Silas tried not to cry. "He's growing so fast," Elena said. "They do that. Soon he'll be running. Then we won't be able to keep up. We'll manage." And they did. Managed through teething and colds and the 1,000 small crises of raising a child. Managed through hard winters and lean times. Managed because they'd learned that surviving wasn't enough. You had to live too. 2 years after Jacob's birth, Elena got pregnant again. A girl this time, born during a thunderstorm with half the drama of her brother. They named her Mary. Silas held his new daughter and thought about the woman whose name she carried, the life that had burned, the family he'd lost. And then he looked at Elena, exhausted and beautiful. At Jacob, climbing onto the cot to see his new sister. At this impossible family that had formed from trauma and choice and stubborn refusal to give up. The ghosts would always be there. The scars would always remain. But they didn't define him anymore. This did. This moment. This family. This life he'd built from ashes. Victor Mercer kept his word. Visited once a year, always alone, always respectful. Watched his grandchildren grow. Never tried to take them or control them. Just loved them from a distance and tried to be better than he'd been. Marshal Hutchins rode up one last time, 3 years after the standoff. "Just checking in," he said, "making sure everyone's still breathing." "We're good," Silas told him. "I can see that." Hutchins watched Jacob and Mary play in the clearing. "Never thought I'd say this, but you did all right, Crow, against all odds. Had help. Best kind of success." The marshal tipped his hat. "I'll leave you to it. Keep yourselves out of trouble." "We'll try." Hutchins rode away and Silas never saw him again. The mountain that had been his prison became his sanctuary. The cabin that had been his tomb became his home, and the isolation that had been his punishment became his greatest blessing. Because out here, far from civilization's eyes and judgment, broken people could put themselves back together, could choose who they wanted to be instead of who they'd been, could find redemption in the most unlikely places. Elena found him one evening, years later, standing at the edge of the plateau watching the sun set over the valley. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How far we've come. Long way from that saloon. Long way from a lot of things." She leaned against him. Behind them, the cabin glowed with lamplight. Inside, their children laughed at something. Life, simple and perfect in its imperfection. "You ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Stopping that day? Saving me?" Silas thought about it, about the life he'd had before, the solitude, the emptiness, the slow march toward nothing. "Not once," he said, "even with all the trouble I brought? Especially because of it. Trouble means living. I'd forgotten what that felt like." Elena smiled and kissed him. "I love you, you know." "I know. Love you too." They stood together watching the light fade, two souls who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build something better. The world below might still whisper about the mountain ghost, might tell stories about Silas Crow, the killer who vanished into the high country. But those were old stories about a dead man. This Silas, the one with a family, a future, a reason to wake up, he was someone new. Someone who'd learned that the worst thing you could do wasn't failing. It was giving up. That redemption wasn't something granted. It was something built, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. That love didn't erase pain, it just made the pain worth carrying. And that sometimes the harshest places, the frozen mountains, the broken people, the impossible situations, those were exactly where life decided to bloom anyway. Behind them, Mary called out, "Papa, Jacob won't share." Silas smiled. "Duty calls." "Better answer it." They walked back together to the warm cabin, to their children, to the life they'd built from nothing and would protect with everything. The ghosts would always linger, the scars would always show, but they didn't define the story anymore. This did. This family, this love, this stubborn insistence that broken things could be made whole again. And high above the world, where the air was thin and the living was hard, Silas Crow finally understood what his wife had tried to tell him years ago. He was still human, still capable of good, still worthy of the second chance he'd been given. The mountain kept its secrets. The valley kept its distance. And in between, a family thrived where everyone said nothing could grow. Because that's what survival looked like when you stopped just surviving and started living instead.